this was 1983. So computers were not mainstream yet. And there's no email. So imagine this. It's in the middle of winter. The story editor sends a taxi to my home with a 10 by 13 envelope with 3 sheets of paper in it. And it says the name of the title, like Gadget Goes Hawaiian was one of them, I remember. And Dr. Claw is trying to do this and this. And here's where Gadget's going to go. And by the end of Act 1, he has to be here. And then they did the same for Act 2, the same for Act 3. So I got right to it, typing on my, wait for the pause, Smith Corona electric typewriter with a fresh bottle of whiteout. So if you're listening to this and you're under the age of 35 and you're wondering what the heck is whiteout, that's when you make a little error in typing the wrong letter, and you've got to shake this little bottle of white liquid, apply just a little bit to the letter, wait for it to dry because you don't want to smudge it when you do the rewrite of putting the R instead of the T. So anyways, here I am typing away on my Smith Corona electric typewriter. 4 days and 32 pages later, I call the story editor. Okay, I've got my first one done. They'd send the taxi over to my home. He'd pick it up. And then the next day, I'd get a call from the story editor. We loved it. We're sending a taxi over with the next one. And that went on for a couple of months. And pardon my throat, I got a bit of a dry throat today, bit of a cough. Sorry about that. And then in the summer, about July of that summer in 83, I got a call from my agent and he said, I got great news for you. The producers of Gadget loved your writing the best, and they're offering you a full-time position in their LA office at $1,500 a week. Are you interested? I said, when do I start?
Hey everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have the honor today of having Donny Young on the podcast, and this is exciting for me for many reasons. A, because I love the season where Donny was a part of movies, and you'll see him on screen. We'll get to that. Donny also wrote for one of my favorite shows growing up, which makes me so happy. And Donny's working on new projects, which is great. So if you're a writer and you've ever been frustrated, you're thinking, I just haven't had my big break. I don't know if I'm on the right path. Donny is here to kind of give you some words of wisdom from his career, a long and beautiful career in writing. And I'm so excited to have Donny on the podcast. The formidable Donny Young here on the podcast. Donny, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Do you like how I snuck the formidable in there? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Awesome. Tell everybody, Donny, where you are right now in this big world of ours.
So I'm in Toronto, which is, about an hour from you and Catherine. So we're fellow Canadians.
That makes my heart happy. I'm glad for that. You have had a pretty interesting career to date and many great things ahead as well, but we had a great conversation. It was meant to be a 30-minute quick call to touch base and plan out today's episode, but it went on, and I didn't want to stop it because there's so many great stories from your side.
Almost 2 hours. It was so much fun just chatting with you and getting to know you and telling you about my career. And
So my goal today is to distill some of that conversation, bring it to the podcast, because people listening to this going, oh, I wish I was there for that 2 hours. That would have been great. But we'll bring the best of the best. And there's lots more to talk about from your side of the mic. But again, thank you so much for doing this, Donny. Loved having you here.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be introduced to all your listeners. And I hope I can shed some light and inspire some people out there to keep on trucking.
Let's start with the most recent project you're working on right now. I'm on your Instagram page, The 4MIDABLES, and I'm seeing amazing artwork. I'm seeing all kinds of great content around this new project you're working on, newer project. Can you give us a little insight into The 4MIDABLES and maybe where did the original idea come from for this new project?
Yeah, well, actually, thanks, Dave. Actually, I came up with the concept in 2007 as a cartoon series. And I had looked at a number of cartoons that were out at that time, and I wasn't impressed with them. I thought there was really not much of an educational component. for young boys and girls. And so I looked at how can I create something that is going to educate and inspire and entertain. And I came up with a concept of 4 teenagers, brother and sister, whose father is a renowned metaphysicist working at NASA. And he's created a teleporting device so that the family can take vacations around the world. And he's going to keep it a secret. He doesn't want anybody to know about it because he realizes that if it gets into the hands of bad people, it could be a problem. So he doesn't file a patent. No one knows he's doing it. And so along the way in their travels, they ended up meeting 2 other teenagers. Maya is in India, and she's a paraplegic, but she's also brilliant. And she's working with the equivalent of the NASA space agency in India. And then they meet Raphael in Spain, who's a cadet in the police force training. And so at that point, I got the Bible done. My agent sent it to the producers of Gadget, and they loved it, but they were looking at the 5-year-old demographic. So this was basically 10 and up. Long story short, we ended up getting a partner in Spain who put $1 million into it for the animation. We got it the Teletoon in Canada. They loved it, and they asked me to write one script to see the characters come alive. So I wrote the script, and I got so excited seeing the characters come alive. I wrote 6 more episodes, and they loved it, and it was ready to go ahead in the fall of 2007. But then they got the numbers for the shows that they were currently showing, and the adventure shows were not drawing the audience they needed to keep their advertisers happy. So they passed on it. And so that was really disappointing. But as I mentioned to you on Friday, things happen for a reason. And about 3 weeks later, my mom was diagnosed with early stages Alzheimer's. About a month after that, my dad had a minor stroke that affected his balance. And then about a month after that, my mom slipped on some ice when she was walking home from the store and fractured her wrist. So she wasn't able to help my dad. So I moved in to help my mom and dad. They lived about 5 minutes from me. And so I basically put everything on the shelf. My focus with my mom and dad. And then unfortunately, a year later, my mom passed away. And so I stayed with my dad. I didn't want to have him going to a nursing home. And I was with him for almost 2 years, and then he passed away. So there I was, what am I going to do at that point? Now, flash forward here to this summer, I'm looking at the 4MIDABLES, which in the interim, a year earlier, I had decided that I wanted to do it as a live action TV series. I didn't want to do it as a cartoon anymore. And so I did a series Bible, and I wrote the pilot episode, and then my agent suddenly retired after the writer's strike. I'd been with them since the early 80s, and it was like, oh my God, like you need an agent to get your work out there. And even though I've produced, it's different with something like this because I haven't been producing like I was earlier on in the late 80s where I produced some TV movies. So here I was in the summer thinking, maybe I should try to get a buzz going for it by writing a book, writing it as an adventure novel, because I have enough information that I developed in the Bible that I could take this for 2, 3, 4 books easy. I mean, I've got enough information in the Bible that the series arc for streamers, they can see that it's got enough in it to go at least 50 episodes, which is like 5 years. Yeah, because that's what I want. So I've never written long form, and I didn't even know if I could do it. but I just hit lightning in a bottle. I started writing it on Friday, July the 12th, and I'm staring at my laptop with the blank page, and I'm going, okay, let's see if I could pull this off. And it took a few days to get going, and then it just clicked. And I realized that when I had created the Formidables, I hadn't gotten into the backstory, because when you're doing a cartoon show, you've got 10-year-olds. You don't have to get into the weeds on how all these different things happen. They just want to be entertained.
Yeah.
They're not going to have a question, well, how did this happen? How did they?
Right.
So I never gone down that road. And so this forced me to really go deep on how Madison and Ethan ended up meeting Maya in India and Raphael in Spain. And it was the hook between their father working at NASA, who recognized Maya was very similar to him, because Mr. Giller, the father, this renowned scientist, he had been a prodigy. He'd gone to MIT when he was 12 and graduated when he was 16 and was hired by NASA. And then he learns about Maya, who works, as I mentioned earlier, for the equivalent of the, for India's NASA version.
Yeah.
And so he hears about her, and they want him to meet her. And so he teleports over to India, pretending that he's just flown 24 hours and so on, right? And that's the hook that brings Madison and Ethan to meet Maya. And that became the rock, like the real foundation for the whole story. And once I had that, I was really excited, because now it was really a strong core to the whole thing. And without getting into the details, I mean, it was a very lengthy process to introduce the characters, for Maya to find out about the teleporting device, the reaction of Madison and Ethan, who did not want to betray their father's confidence and trust. So it really worked well. And I ended up getting the book done in like 45 days, got the artwork done. I used AI to create the look of the 4 teens.
Yeah.
And it blew me away, because I just went into Mid-Journey, the AI software, and I said, imagine a 17-year-old girl, all-American girl, cute, ponytail, wearing a pink top, and she got her hands on her hips, staring into the camera. And boom, 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 boom. And within a day, I had all 4 characters. And it was like, wow, they're actually real. And then I hired a graphic artist. I said, this is how I want the cover to look. And she nailed it on the first go-around. And then I got it up on Amazon. And then the hard work started. You know, you've got a million like young adult books on Amazon. I have no idea how to promote it. So I'm Googling and going on YouTube channels. How do you promote a YA adventure book and so on, right? And I chose Maya to be in India because it's a huge market. And I know to get a streamer like Disney or Netflix or Apple interested, they want something that's going to have global reach. They don't want it all set in the US.
Right.
So I've got Maya in India. I've got Raphael in Spain. And Madison and Ethan live with their father in Merritt Island, which is 6 miles from the Kennedy Space Center. So I've got the market covered. I had put the pilot script on what's called the Blacklist in LA, where writers and producers, directors who have a project can post a script. You pay $100 for each review. So I wanted to get some feedback before I pitch it to producers. So I paid for 2. And the reviews were great. They said, this has got the potential to be a global success. It could run for years and years. So I knew I had something. And then now with the book, I've been able to get some really good reviews. And it's just a matter of, more and more reviews and people finding out about it. I've had people message me from Australia, from India, from the US and Canada, who have seen, like I've ran some little video, I put 15-minute videos together on Canva. And I can talk about that later if you want, just people might be interested. But you can put together some great little videos, put them on Instagram just to get awareness, right? And so now I've just started writing the second book, which is called Who Are They? And this one is going to be even more fun than the first, because the first, as I mentioned, it's a 300-page book, approximately like 292 or something, and about 175 or 80 pages is developing all of the relationships before they actually go on their first crime case. Mm-hmm. And now book 2 is going to really ratchet up the tension, and they're going to be on even bigger missions. And so that ends up causing a media frenzy, because people are wondering eventually, wait a minute, these crimes are all being solved within 24 hours. And just to add for your listeners, Maya, being so brilliant, when she learns of the teleporting device, she's been fascinated with teleporting and wondering if it's possible to go back in time. And she actually spent a couple of semesters in college studying it. But what nobody knows, even her parents, is her reputation as being a computer whiz has attracted the equivalent of the India CIA. And she has an elaborate array of technology in her bedroom behind a secret wall. And she's on call 24/7 with that India CIA. And so she'll get a call at 3 a.m, urgent. And she'll go on a call with them. And so she's learning about all these crimes that are happening in India and around the world. And she's frustrated, and so are her superiors, because they don't have enough evidence to track these people down. And so she thinks, wow, they've got this teleporting device. I'm fascinated about going back in time. What if we could just go back in time 24 hours? That's all we need. And we can have eyes and ears right there as the crime is happening, and then anonymously let the authorities know this is where they went. And she's got all kinds of, like, she can go in and check the CCTV of any city in the world. Wow. So she can track them when they're making their escape. So she presents this idea to Madison and Ethan, and they're like, okay, I guess, and that's how the whole thing started. So now in the second book, people are wondering, wait a minute, how are all these crimes happening where they get solved in 24 hours when the police had no leads? And so the media gets onto it. They're wondering, are these former Marines? Are they Army personnel or retired police officers? And meanwhile, Madison and Ethan are going to school. She's got soccer practice. She's a soccer star. Maya's doing her work at the India Space Center. Yeah. And Raphael's on the beat as a new cop in Spain. And meanwhile, they're all on call 24/7 if something happens and they find a mission that they can go on. But it has to have happened within the last 24 hours. Mm-hmm. And that's the difficulty. Yeah. And so like Madison will be on a mission, and she has to get back to school because she's the captain of the soccer team. So that 24-hour clock really antes up the tension. It ramps it up, because now they've got to go at a certain time, because if they hear about a case, like in the book, there's a kidnapping, and they're on vacation with their mom and dad. They're having a great time snorkeling, and they get a message from Maya saying, we need to get on this. And they know if they stay for the duration of the day with their parents, they're not going to have, so they have to get back, right? So it's got a lot of elements to it.
That's amazing. Now, I'm hearing some similarities to another project that you worked on in the past. It was cartoon-based, and it was probably one of my favorite shows in the world. And when we got on to initially talk, and this came up in conversation, I was like, I was kind of fanboying just a little bit, Donny, I got to tell you. Inspector Gadget, the show that for me was amazing because it wasn't based on violence. It was
Yes.
based on great stories,
Yeah.
humor,
Yeah.
intrigue, scientific devices, and
Yeah.
amazing things, and bumbling Inspector Gadget and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Talk about your role in Inspector Gadget, Donny. I think people listening who are in my age group are going to like freak out when they hear you say this, but
Yeah.
talk a little bit about your role that you played in the Inspector Gadget
Yeah.
series.
So ironically, my first writing job was writing a TV movie for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And it was an historical drama based on events that happened in Canadian history with a fascinating story. I finished that, and we were going to be starting to film it in around April of 1983. And my agent in LA calls me and he says, "How do you feel about writing cartoons?" And my thing was, hey, whatever it is other than horror. I don't like horror. But yeah. So the creator producer of Gadget was in Toronto, and my agent explained that they needed writers who could write comedy, but they were not a member of the union. So he said, "This isn't going to help you join the writers union." I needed one more credit. But he said, it's your foot in the door. Let's show you, because you've written historical drama, you've got a comedy script that we got. Let's do this. So I go down to meet the producer. His name was Jean Chalopin from France. And he shows me these storyboards of Gadget with all his gadgets and so on. And he said, we're going to have, I think it was 14 or 16 writers, whatever, and they were doing 65 episodes. And again, now, as I mentioned to you on Friday, like this was 1983. So computers were not mainstream yet. And there's no email. So imagine this. It's in the middle of winter. The story editor sends a taxi to my home with a 10 by 13 envelope with 3 sheets of paper in it. And it says the name of the title, like Gadget Goes Hawaiian was one of them, I remember. And Dr. Claw is trying to do this and this. And here's where Gadget's going to go. And by the end of Act 1, he has to be here. And then they did the same for Act 2, the same for Act 3. So I got right to it, typing on my, wait for the pause, Smith Corona electric typewriter with a fresh bottle of whiteout. So if you're listening to this and you're under the age of 35 and you're wondering what the heck is whiteout, that's when you make a little error in typing the wrong letter, and you've got to shake this little bottle of white liquid, apply just a little bit to the letter, wait for it to dry because you don't want to smudge it when you do the rewrite of putting the R instead of the T.
Yeah.
So anyways, here I am typing away on my Smith Corona electric typewriter. 4 days and 32 pages later, I call the story editor. Okay, I've got my first one done. They'd send the taxi over to my home. He'd pick it up. And then the next day, I'd get a call from the story editor. We loved it. We're sending a taxi over with the next one. And that went on for a couple of months. And then in the summer, about July of that summer in 83, I got a call from my agent, and he said, I got great news for you. The producers of Gadget loved your writing the best, and they're offering you a full-time position in their LA office at $1,500 a week. Are you interested? I said, when do I start? So I hop on a plane, fly to LA. They take me down to the immigration and, whatever the U.S. government, what do they call it? It's a U.S. immigration, but the State Department, I guess, something like that.
Yeah.
And I filled out all the paperwork, and they wouldn't give me a green card because I was taking a job from an American writer. And they said, well, no, but he's written these shows for us, and we want, and they wouldn't give me a green card. So that was frustrating.
Yeah.
But at least, it's two things about it that are disappointing is, number one, obviously no residuals because it's been shown around the world for 41 years. Like that September when I arrived in Los Angeles and I rented an apartment, I put the TV on one morning and there was Gadget. It was on TV. And that was the first thing I'd written because the CBC movie that we filmed in April of that year, that spring, that wasn't going to be on until the following year. So the first thing I ever wrote that showed on TV was an episode for Gadget. And at the end, they would have written by, and they'd have this card up with like 14 names on it. I'm looking, and we had to use a pseudonym. We couldn't use our real name. So my name on the credits, if someone freeze frames, was Don Martin because my middle name was Mick Martin. So I called myself Don Martin on the scripts.
There you go. So yeah, again, that show for me is always been hilarious and fun. And again, we talked about there was a lack of violence on purpose. Yeah. That's not why it was done that way. You wanted to make sure that it was a great, healthy kids show, which again kind of leads to Formidables. Again, not based in violence, right? It's all like something that's family friendly. And you do that on purpose.
Oh yeah. Like I think there's just way too much violence on TV and film for kids. And I just wanted to write something. I knew the Formidables were wholesome kids. They were good kids. They had their own individual talents and they respected their parents and they lead, good lives. And here they're put in a situation where they're able to do some fantastic things to help people who have been victimized by crime. And they're not doing it to get 1 million likes on Instagram and, hey, I'm wonderful, I got all these followers. They're doing it anonymously. And that's the thing that really I wanted to get across is because so many kids, there's so much pressure on kids these days, like, oh, how many likes did you get for your dog, doing the funny whatever, and that they measure their self-worth almost in many cases on how they're perceived by their friends and their peers. It was how are you doing on social media? And they're not doing that, right? And so there's no violence, there's no bad language, there's no sex. It's just really interesting situations that these kids get themselves into, and they're doing it totally anonymously. And then the reaction that the kids have when they see the beneficiary of their kindness, of their work, there's the first case they do, the gentleman's been out of work and he's going to lose his car and his car's stolen and there's no insurance on the car. And it's like the end of the world for him. And they go back in time, they find who stole the car, and then they see him on TV with his wife and he's just crying his eyes out. And it resonates with these teens because they realize we made a difference.
Yeah.
We helped. And that guy is never going to know what they did for him, and they're okay with that.
Right.
They just know that they helped a fellow man, right? And that's powerful.
Empathy and compassion and action, all of that. Yeah. Like they're actually taking steps to make the world better. I love the idea of Formidables. I love everything about it. Donny, it's great.
I think it's going to be well received once I get it. It takes a while to get the word out there, but the reviews that I've had so far and people who've read the book, I've shared it with friends who have kids and the kids love it. So just a matter of getting it out there.
So when you were writing for Gadget, what was one of the characteristics of the Gadget character that you as a writer really enjoyed including in your writings? Like what was it about that character specifically that you really enjoyed?
Well, Gadget thought that he had all the answers, but it was really Penny who was the one and their dog Brain who really found the little clues, and they never said to Gadget, "You're an idiot." We did the. He was just like the bumbling Inspector Clouseau type character, right? And so that was fun that he's going around and doing all these things, thinking that he's got everything under control, but he's really just kind of a goofy, naive guy. And if he didn't have Penny helping him out, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. So it was fun to write a character like that.
And I see that in Formidables, you have 4 characters doing something behind the scenes without getting recognition. They're not the star of the show. They don't get all the praise. But Penny and the dog, they're doing all this work behind the scenes and making somebody else look good. So there's kind of a correlation between the two different writings, right?
Yeah, and the thing that I had to do with the Formidables so that I reach a wide audience, not just geographically, but I wanted characters that were really distinct. So you've got Madison as a soccer star, but she's very humble. She's one of the top-rated soccer players in Florida, and all the top universities are looking to have her play for them. Maya, I've talked about her being so smart, but it's very, very hush-hush. Even her parents don't know about the work she's doing with the India equivalent CIA. Raphael's a great guy. Think Raphael Nadal. He's the guy I modeled him after, like this swarthy, handsome, swashbuckling kind of guy.
Yeah.
But very modest. And then Ethan, he's just like his dad. He's a science geek, and he's come up with all these different inventions, which they use on their missions. So I've got very different characters. They're not all, cardboard cutouts and, whatever. There's real people there.
Yeah.
And it was fun to really dive into their relationship and how they're affected, and to track how they started in page 1 in the book and their progression throughout. They really go through a character change emotionally and physically by the end of the book. And then book 2, it just takes off.
When we sat down and talked, the one thing I walked away with, Donny, talking to you, was just the fact that you created opportunities for things to come your way. Even when things got frustrating, you kept writing, you kept doing what you're doing, but you put yourself into places where success could find you. And you made the opportunities happen just by being open to the phone calls, the messages. Hey, Donny, would you do this? Donny, would you do that? Sure, I'll do that. And that seemed to lead to the next thing. You kind of dropped something on me in our conversation where one of my iconic movies that I love from back in the day, you just kind of subtly mentioned, oh yeah, and I was in that movie too. And I'm like, wait a minute, hang on. Whoa, what? And I actually went and watched the video on YouTube and watched the ending of the movie. And there you are in all your glory as an extra in this movie. For anybody who has never heard of this movie, you got to go watch it. It's the best. Like Cannonball Run, you're in the end part of the movie, rubbing shoulders with some of Hollywood's elite. And I'm just like, how does that happen? Like, the people you're talking to and the people you get to sit across the table from, the places you get to go as well. Like, can you give us just a little taste? I know we talked about this for a long time, Donny. I love this, but can you give us a little taste behind the scenes of this?
Yeah, so I'm always about experiences, learning, and keeping my options open. So when I'm living in LA, I can't legally work. And so I get cast in a play at the Actors Studio that Lee Strasberg was producing. And I meet all these great actors, and they're talking about, well, and you can't work, but you should do some extra work. So they told me about some extras casting sessions for movies and TV shows. So they pay like $30 to $50 a day cash. But for me, that was great because I could put gas in my car and food on the table. It helps. But I'm always interested in experiences, like taking the mystery out of something, right? So like here I am on a TV set with actors I've seen for years, and I'm an extra where I've got one of them I was in with Kevin Dobson, who was in Kojak with Telly Savalas for people who are our age. And so I had to put a smock on and I go in, but it takes the mystery and the awe out of it. You feel, okay, this is what you have to do. And so I'm doing a whole bunch of these things. And remind me before I finish to tell you a little bit about a movie that I was in with George Siegel, just for 1 minute at the end.
Yeah.
So my buddy and I, Marlon from the Actors Studio, we get cast in this movie, Cannonball Run. And they didn't tell us anything about who's in it. So we get down to Redondo Beach. This is in June of 1980. And we see these limos pulling up. Burt Reynolds pops out. Farrah Fawcett pops out of another one. Roger Moore, Dean Martin, like Sammy Davis. And then we're like, holy jumping, this is amazing, right? So Dom DeLuise was a comedian and character actor. And he's just sitting around and he's asking me, like, what's your story? So I told him, I've just got hired or signed by an agent. I wrote Inspector Gadget. Or no, this is before Gadget. Sorry. I wrote a movie that Carl Reiner really loves and so on. So he becomes real friendly with me. And he says, okay, now tomorrow we're going to be doing this scene. This is at the end of the day. Yeah. We're going to be doing this scene at the end of the movie. I'm going to give you some screen time. And so we do the scene the next day where Burt and Farrah and Roger Moore, Dean Martin and Sammy Davis and a few others are really upset with Dom because he's ruined the whole thing. This car chase from Atlanta, and they end up at Redondo Beach. And instead of getting the first prize, he stops to save someone, and it's a real bad situation. So Dom, he did like 20 takes because everybody, Burt and Farrah, everyone was just laughing so hard they couldn't keep a straight face. And Dom DeLuise's line was, I don't care. I've always wanted to be Captain America. And he would go down out of camera range, put a cape on, and he'd come up and he'd put his arm around me and he'd grin, and that was it. So the next day I come on set and the first AD comes up and says, Donny, we got to shoot that scene over again. Oh, did I do something wrong? He said, no, Dom did. He shouldn't have put his arm around you. And that's blah, blah, blah. We got to shoot it over again. So that was the end of shooting on the Friday, and I'm having lunch. And for football fans from the 70s and 80s, Terry Bradshaw was the star quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Right.
So he's having lunch with Jamie Farr, who was on TV at the time with the TV series MASH with Alan. So I'm having lunch with them, and Jamie Farr says to Terry Bradshaw, are you going to Sammy's party tomorrow night? So my ears perk up. Party, Sammy Davis's, opportunity to network.
Right.
And now again, 1980. There's no cell phone. You can't text. You can't, so you're just memorizing, because Terry says, what's the address? Is there an invite? No, it's 1151 Summit Drive in Beverly Hills. So I'm sitting there having lunch, 1151 Summit Drive, Beverly Hills, over and over again. Yeah. And long story short, Marlon and I get our nice suits on, open neck, clean shaven, hair combed, shoes shined, and we drive over to Beverly Hills Saturday night. We wait till 9 o'clock, so it's going to be busy. And as I was saying to you, in Beverly Hills, a lot of the homes have big bushes and trees in front. You can't see the number for the house, so they have the number written in a little block on the curb by the driveway with a red background and then white lettering, 1151. So we get around the corner. Oh, there we go. And then we see the police officer in uniform, LAPD, and a big bodyguard. And Marlon says, well, I guess we're not getting in. I said, sure we are. He said, well, what if they have a guest list? Well, we're not on it, but we'll bluff. We walked right past them, no problem, went inside. This is Saturday night, Beverly Hills, Sammy Davis's home. And we walk in the living room, and there's 7 people in there. We figured there are going to be 50, 60 people, because when we signed in on the guest book at the front, Burt Reynolds, Farrah Fawcett, Roger Moore, we figured, hey, great party, right? And there's 7 people. So Marlon's just like a deer in headlights. He said, let's get out of here. He said, no, we're already in. Let's just play it. So we grabbed a glass of wine, and Farrah was sitting at the far end of the living room with a couple of actresses who were in the movie. And we went and stood behind her, looking out at the beautiful grounds with swimming pool, guest house, the whole thing. And then we'd been there maybe 5 minutes. And Sammy's bodyguard, who we had seen on the set for the previous 3 days, he walks over, and Marlon sees him coming, and he just sort of slides away from me, like 5 feet away. And Rice says, excuse me, who are you guys? I said, oh, my name's Donny Young. This is my friend Marlon Hoffman. I said, you work for Sammy, don't you? I think I saw you on set yesterday.
Smart.
He said, my name's Rice. And he says, Donny, who are you here with? So this is when I had my line prepared, because at the end of the movie, when we finished lunch, I found Sammy's Winnebago, and I went over, and he was signing some autographs, and I gave him a line about having met him before, which was partly true. I was going to have dinner with my acting coach and his wife a year earlier, and had she not gotten sick, we would have been out for dinner with her friends who were asked to join Sammy and his wife for dinner. Yeah. So I used that as a little white lie. And he posed for a picture with me because I had Marlon bring a camera. So I haven't. Did you get that picture?
Yes, I saw it. It's amazing.
So here I am. I get my picture taken with Sammy, and the reason for it was I wanted him to have a visual. Okay, the guy's name is Donny, and he was in the movie, etc. So mission accomplished. Now, I'm now with Rice, and he says, who are you here with? So I dropped the line, well, Sammy and I were chatting after the film yesterday, and he said, if you're not busy tomorrow night, come on over, we're having a party. And Marlon is just like, are you kidding me? Like, he says, where did that come from? I said, well, I'm an actor and a writer. You got to have a line ready. You can't just go, I don't know. So we go and sit down. Marlon's trying to look like he's invisible in a sofa chair about 10 feet away. And I'm chatting opposite Farrah and these two other actresses. And she's talking about going to New York, starring in a play and so on. And I mentioned that Marlon and I were in the cast of a play that Lee Strasberg's producing at the Actors Studio, and that Carl Reiner is looking to direct a movie that so she's like, oh, wow. Yeah. And then in mid-conversation, she looks over my right shoulder and she says, oh, what, Donny, I think, and I turn over and I see Rice at the end of the living room, 30 feet away, motioning towards me, and I'm thinking, oh, this is so embarrassing. I'm talking with Farrah Fawcett.
Yeah.
And now I'm being asked to leave. Are you kidding me? Your timing sucked, man. Well, I stand up, and I'm thinking he wants Marlon and I. So I look at Marlon and I go, and when I did that, Rice goes, no, just you. And I'm thinking, that's interesting. So I walked up to him and he says, Donny, why don't you go upstairs? Sammy'd like to see you. And I'm thinking to myself, I bet he does.
Dun, dun, dun.
So I'm walking upstairs, and at the top, there's Sammy with a pool cue in one hand, a glass of scotch in the other, just socks on, no shoes. And I hear him say, hey, Donny, how you doing, man? Shake hands. He says, did you play pool? I said, yeah, not very well. Well, let's rack him up. So I started playing pool with Sammy. There's a couple of actors up there, and we're having a great time. He's asking me my story. He knows he didn't invite me. I got to meet this guy who's got the balls to come into my home as a lowly extra. And then I tell him, yeah, we're doing a play with Lee Strasberg, and Carl Reiner's going to, he says, wow, that's really, and it was magical.
Yeah. I love that.
I couldn't make up that story.
No. And I love how you, as a writer, put yourself into places where success can find you. Because I think a lot of the writers that listen to this podcast, Donny, they kind of feel like they're writing in a vacuum. They're writing on their own. They don't know if anybody's ever going to see their material. But they have this passion to write.
Yes.
And then to see and hear your story, you have that same passion, but you put things in place to give you the opportunity to be successful. Yeah. You put yourself out there. You said yes more than you said no, right? Yeah. You just took the jobs that came without really pre-planning how this is going to lead to that, which is going to lead to that. You just said yes.
Yeah, just roll with the punches because you never know what it's going to lead to.
Yeah. So
right?
Donnie, if there's somebody listening and they're a new author and they're looking for inspiration from a seasoned writer for television, movies, books, everything, and they could have a few moments with you, what kind of words of wisdom would you give to a young new author who is eager to pursue writing and to chase this as a career for them? Any words of wisdom you'd give to somebody listening right now, Donnie?
Sure. I mean, like for me, I would not have been able to get into writing if I hadn't taken acting classes, because that taught me, because you don't start off doing scenes. You don't start off doing Shakespeare. You start off doing improvs. And that's when you learn as an aspiring actor what it's like to have to say lines, right? So you've got to be able to be nimble on your feet. So that experience for 6 months before we did any kind of actual Shakespeare or whatever, Barefoot in the Park or whatever,
Yeah.
that was really important. So I would say to anybody, whether you're writing books or TV, enroll with an acting workshop, even if it's just for a few months, and just to be on the other side, where you have to put yourself in the position of the actor that you're going to be, or the character you're going to be writing about. With writers for television or film, we're so lucky now, unlike when I was starting out, where you had the resource to be able to go online and download for free a PDF of a film you just watched on Netflix, because the evolution of writing has changed so much. When I started writing years ago, you would have 15 lines of text, like a narrative, like you'd have in a novel, describing all the information that's going to be seen. Now, the word is, you don't want to have a lot of black on the page when they turn the page. They want to see a lot of white, meaning there's only a few. So it's like 2 lines of text, be snappy with it, and so on. So I look at what I'm doing in a novel, and I try to apply that as well, because you can really get carried away with all the, the coffee cup was this and da-da-da-da. Just keep it moving, You can really bog it down with so much extraneous stuff. So if you're a new writer and getting into writing novels, pick a genre. Like, don't try to master romance, young adult, just pick something that you enjoy reading, first of all, because if you don't like romance, but that's the big seller, don't try to force your way, because you're not going to be able to really do yourself justice.
Yeah.
So find a niche, read a lot of books before you even start, because you need to get the feeling of, okay, how do I express the characters? How do I create the characters? How do they keep the story moving, and so on? And then just be open to any opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, we're so lucky now to have Amazon and Goodreads. I mean, the opportunity to connect with the world. I'm getting direct messages from people in India and Australia, and it blows me away.
Yeah. You wouldn't have that back in the 80s, right?
Oh,
no.
Yeah, it's like, if I think I mentioned to you, like if someone had said to me in 1983, 84, like say Michael J. Fox said, here, borrow my DeLorean and take it for a ride into the future.
Right.
And you're going to be able to go into a bookstore on your computer that you won't even walk into it. Like it's virtual.
Right.
Look at them like with the third eye, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, it's not real. So we're so lucky to be in this day and age. We don't have to use whiteout and do, Smith Corona electric typewriters.
Yeah. And the other thing too I love is, going back to Cannonball Run, you put yourself around creative people just by being on set. You're watching how they film. You're watching how everything works behind the scenes. All of that is inventory and knowledge for you that you can take to your writing that could lead you down a path. You're connecting with superstars who now know you by name. They're not going to know you when you're sitting in your studio apartment looking at a blank piece of paper, right?
The other thing too that I'd like to share, if we have time,
sure,
is at the end of 1980, after all the hoopla, like I got signed by an LA agent. Carl Reiner said my script was the best original comedy he read in 10 years. I had a producer from 20th Century. We had a top TV star at the time with the #1 show, said, yeah, I'm really interested, but we're going into production on the show, so we can't do it this year. And then whatever, it got stalled. And at the end of that year, I got a call from Rene Valente, this wonderful producer from 20th Century, and just to catch up. And I said, I'm really frustrated. I thought it was going to be going faster. And she said, Donny. And she repeated what I just said about all the, really good things that have happened for me. And she says, let me tell you a story. You'll never forget this story. And I want you to always think about this. She said, several years ago, I got a call from a friend of mine who was an agent for an actor who was already decided, I've had it. I'm quitting the business. I'm going home and I'm never coming back. And this agent said, Renee, you're such a wonderful person. I want this actor's last touch point with Hollywood to be something positive with you. So this actor shows up. They have a 15-minute chat. He tells her he's frustrated. He's typecast. He knows he's a leading man, but they just don't give him a chance. I've had it. I'm broke. I'm going home. That's it. Thanks for your time. And Renee, to her credit, recognized something in this guy, a spark. He had the it factor. And she said, you need to lose some weight, and I don't want you to quit. And he said, yeah, but I don't have any money. I can't pay my rent. Don't worry about it. My husband and I have a guest house in our property. You can live there rent-free. We'll pay for your food, but you have to do two things. You got to get your body in shape, swim in the pool, exercise, watch what you eat, and get your head space so you're ready to go if it's 2 months or 3 months, but get your head space going as well. And she said, Donny, he did that. 90 days later, he had a whole new lease on life. We put him out there for work. And she said, do you know who that was? Do you have any idea? I said, I haven't a clue. Long pause. Burt Reynolds. And I said, are you kidding me? She said, Donny, that's how close Burt Reynolds came to not being the #1 movie star in the world. In my office, he was already packed his stuff in his car. He was heading home to Jupiter, Florida to become a cop like his father. And so he had a choice to make. He could have said, yeah, thanks for your time. I appreciate it, but I'm out of here. But he took the opportunity that she graciously gave him because she didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
She could have said, okay, I gave you a little talk. I guess I can't convince you. But she cared about him. She recognized that he had something in him, and she didn't want to see that spark extinguished and leave Hollywood and go home feeling like he's a failure, doing something that he didn't want to do and not having his career fulfilled. And look what happened. I said, I wish you would have told me this story when I met you because I was in Cannonball Run.
Right?
He says, really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Right?
Wow.
But I mean, so I hang on to that. So when I got down on the dumps over the years and things didn't happen and disappointments, I'd always go back to what Renee said about Burt Reynolds. Don't quit because you don't know what's around the corner. And I also hold on very dearly to what Carl Reiner said about my script. I'd only been writing 2.5 years. I had no formal training, and my agent said, you have a natural talent. You just, something about you, your brain works. You know how to pace and structure. I didn't know what he was talking about. What's pacing? What's structure? I don't know what you're talking about. I just create a scene, dialogue, and write it, right?
Oh, yeah.
So if you're out there listening and you're frustrated, know this. Writers are blessed because we get better as we get older, because the experiences that we've had in the past several years have made us a different person. So I guarantee you, if you're listening to this and you've got a script or a book that you wrote 2 years ago, 5 years ago, you go back and look at it and you will see, wow, I can make this better because you're a different person than the one who wrote it 2 years ago or 5 years ago, because we're the sum total of all the experiences, good and bad.
Right.
I'm a far better writer today than I was 5 years ago. And now I've shown myself that I can actually write a novel, which staggers me because I never thought I could do it.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid of failure. That's the other thing you have to have in this business, whether you're an actor, don't feel, I mean, as I told you the other day, when the first review of my book came out, they don't tell you in advance. Yeah, it was okay. It was a 3-star or whatever. And so I went on Instagram or on Amazon and I saw, review by Lori Haluda. And she's a recognized reviewer. And she gave it 5 stars. And then she emailed me and she said, Donny, kids are going to love, in capital letters, these characters. It's just amazing. So now it's like a big sigh of relief. Okay, someone liked what I wrote because I didn't know. I didn't know if it was any good. How can I know? I've never done it before. And I don't read YA novels. So I had no comparison. Like, is this,
Yeah.
So, and I get a few more reviews and it's like, okay, maybe I can do this, right? But you don't know until you try.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So if you're thinking about, hey, maybe I should try writing a book, hey, make the decision. Because at the end of the day, no one really cares if you have success. When you get right down to it, you got your immediate family, they wish the best for you and so on, your friends and so on. But at the end of the day, you own your career. That's it.
Yeah.
You. And you got to look in the mirror and say, have I done everything I can to improve my craft, to take advantage of opportunities? And if you can do that, then you just have to let the gods take care of the rest, because all you can do is the work and you can put it out there. And if it finds an audience, wonderful. But to publish a book, it's an accomplishment in itself. Like I have a great deal of pride. Like when I get up in the morning and I'm starting to work on book 2, I have 4 copies of my book on the TV credenza facing me because I get inspired seeing this cover, knowing that I created that. And whether it sells 1,000 or 1,000,000, at least I created something that I'm proud of.
Right. That's great.
So I hope that inspires people that are listening, that if they're sitting on the fence about maybe doing something or trying something, or just don't be afraid of failure. Because failure is just a step to the next success. You'll learn more from your failures than you learn from your success.
I love it. So, Donny, before I wrap up, I got one more thing to ask you about before we wrap up. But as far as connecting with you, finding out more about the Formidables, all of that, I know there's people going to want to talk to you, and hearing your stories, there's people who want to reach out to you. Where do we send people? What is the best place to get in touch with you?
You can send me to Instagram, the Formidables, hashtag the Formidables. And the Formidables is spelled, instead of FOR, it's the big number 4. So the number 4 Midables. And the website is theformidables.com. So message me there. It gets forwarded to me, and I'd be happy to communicate with any of your listeners and give them any insights and ideas, help them out, whatever.
Yeah, and as you're listening to this, I want you to know that Donny is a true, kind gentleman who would love to spend time with you. If you're going to book 30 minutes with Donny, make sure you have 2 hours available, because you're going to have so many great stories from your interaction with him. You're just a sweet guy to talk to, Donny. So appreciate you being on the show. You asked me to remind you about George Segal and that part for the movie. Can you close us off with that?
So I'm in this film called Carbon Copy with George Segal, and I'm an extra. So I'm the premise of it is George Segal learns, he's an executive, that he's the father of an illegitimate child, and the son is a black boy, and he's now early 20s. And I'm chatting with this guy who's playing this illegitimate son, just hanging around chatting, and nothing special. Fast forward like 30 years or something, I'm watching a talk show. And this actor is talking about how he was in this movie with George Segal. He was playing the illegitimate son. And the guy's name was, wait for it, Denzel Washington.
No.
And I'm like, what?
What?
I was talking with Denzel Washington when he was a nobody? I don't believe it.
Wow.
I can't wait to meet him and tell him the story.
Well, maybe he's going to hear the podcast and want to
Hey,
reach out.
that'd be great. That would be great.
So Denzel, if you're listening, make sure you reach out to Donny. He'd love to talk to you again.
Yes.
This is amazing. Donny, again, thank you for being a great example of putting success in front of you. It seems like you have to climb over your next success because you're always putting it ahead, not dragging it behind, but always putting it in front of you. You're a great example of putting yourself into creative spaces to make connections and to learn from others. You're a great example of taking multiple ways of writing and applying it to everything that you do. And there's just so much about you, the depth of your writing background, your character, just a great person to talk to. I would hope in the future we can have a second conversation and we can record it and share with the world. There's so much about you that we haven't even touched on yet. So if we can ever do that in the future, I'm going to keep the door open and you can come back.
Hey, I'd be very happy to do this with you again anytime you want.
Awesome.
You're a great host.
Awesome. Thank you, Donny. Everyone, all the information for Donny and the Formidables, a great book series now coming up with even more in the future. And we're anxiously awaiting this becoming an actual reality, a TV show that we can watch and share with. Lots of great stuff in the future for you, Donny. Keep writing, keep being you. And again, I'm so honored to have you on the show.
Oh, my pleasure, Dave. All the best to you and all the best to all your listeners.
Excellent.
It's been a pleasure.
Hey, thanks for listening to Living the Next Chapter. I'm glad you stayed all the way to the end. You're my new bestie. And the one thing I like to do with my besties is enjoy time together over a cup of coffee. Now, one thing missing in the equation is my coffee cup is empty. And what I would love if, after 390 plus episodes roughly, if you found any value in the podcast and you want to say, hey, Dave, do you need a refill of your coffee cup? I'm looking at it right now, and you know what? It's looking kind of sad. There's not much in the coffee cup. If you want to help support the podcast, I would love you forever as besties and celebrate coffee with you. You can celebrate and support the show at our website using our Buy Me a Coffee link. And all the money goes back into the podcast. And we also like to give it to other podcasters. So if you want to support the show, head over to livingthenextchapter.com and let's top it up. Thank you guys. Thanks for listening. Cheers.